Okay, great. So yeah, just to kind of welcome you all to this seminar on intensive supervision courts. My name's Phil Bowen. I'm Director of the Centre for Justice Innovation. Just a little bit about us. So alongside our other work in the justice systems of the UK, the centre is the National Centre of Expertise in the evidence and practice around problem-solving courts. We provide setup support, training, practice reviews and run shared practice events around problem-solving courts. So we currently work extensively in the criminal justice system, but also in the family justice system, working on problem-solving courts like the family drug and alcohol courts, pathfinder courts. But we're also very pleased and lucky to be part of the first tranche of intensive supervision courts when they were launched in 2023, and we were involved in training the 4 new areas that are now currently underway, and hopefully we'll be supporting the Ministry of Justice with this next round of intensive supervision courts. Just so you have it, today we published a new framework to support the development of intensive supervision courts, which is available on our website, and I'm sure we'll put in the Q&A links to that, as well as links to our recent research. We did a financial analysis on women's problem-solving courts in particular. So just in terms of housekeeping, as I said a bit before, the session is being recorded. So if you want to ask a question, especially if it occurs to you when our 2 guests are speaking, please put it into the Q&A function. I'll then pose those questions to the speakers first off, and then as we move into the kind of more open session, you can put your hands up and we will unmute you and you can ask your question directly. But yes, I'm delighted to welcome you all here this morning. I'm particularly delighted to welcome Rosie Melville from the Ministry of Justice, Head of Intensive Supervision Courts, and Hannah Fisher from HMPPS, who's also Head of Intensive Supervision Courts, to present an overview of kind of where we currently are and what the expression of interest process currently is. So I will hand over to them because you don't need to hear from me. So over to you, Rosie.
Thank you, Phil. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you see that? Great, thank you. So as Phil said, I'm from the Ministry of Justice. Hannah is from HMPPS. So we'll both be presenting today. I'll give more of the sort of high level overview of ISCs, and Hannah can talk more about kind of the detail of how it runs on the ground. So just to start off with a sort of basic, what are ISCs? I assume that most of you know this if you're in the room today, but essentially ISCs are obviously a form of problem-solving court. They've been around since June 23. We've got 4 sites at the moment, so 3 substance misuse sites at Crown Court, and we have 1 site that focuses on women at Birmingham Mags Court. So a really key feature of the way that ISCs work is that it's a multi-agency approach led by a judge on the ground, and that will be the same judge for the same sort of the same person on the ISC. So we see really good relationships develop between the judge and all the support services and that person that leads to really positive outcomes. So another key element is that the ISC includes both kind of punitive and rehabilitative elements. So they kind of work together to sort of like encourage good compliance on the programme and, you know, encourage that person to turn their life around. So there are a suite of sort of sanctions available to the judge and the wider sort of, you know, probation and the other services working with the person to use. And then there are also things that we use to encourage good behaviour. So, for example, we have a small fund that we give to sites that they can use to purchase things, for example, such as theatre tickets, to sort of encourage compliance and to kind of reward good behaviour. In terms of the eligibility criteria, so it's the Crown Court sites are for those who would otherwise be facing 2 years in custody. The MAGS is 12 months, and then we have specific eligibility criteria depending on the cohorts, and I'll come on to that a little bit more later. So in terms of progress so far, so the ISC pilot is subject to a full evaluation programme. So it's quite a long-term programme. We've just very recently completed our process evaluation. You can find the interim process evaluation online. So I'd really recommend that you go and have a look at that if you haven't seen it already. We've just finished the full process evaluation, and that is due to be published this autumn. So again, have a look at that when that comes out. It's really interesting. And then we're going to be doing an impact evaluation and an economic evaluation, but they kind of have to be obviously much longer term so that we have the right amount of data. So if you kind of sign up to become an ISC site, one benefit is that you will be kind of part of this evaluation. So you will kind of be working with our analysts and be getting lots of interesting insights into kind of how your ISC is going and sort of what the long term, eventually what the long term impacts are. So in terms of what we have seen so far in terms of the process evaluation, it has all, as I'm sure you expect, been really positive. The process evaluation, it kind of gives us some sort of pointers for changes that we can make to the model, which we're very much taking on board. But broadly, really positive outcomes. The ISC staff really kind of like working for the ISC, find it really rewarding, interesting, has helped a lot with their development. Really good feedback from the people on the ISC themselves. Reports of kind of increased self-worth, wanting a real desire to kind of want to stop offending, improvements in mental and physical health, so far, although we've only sort of had the process evaluation due to the available time, we are getting really good positive results so far. So as obviously because you're here, we're now looking to expand the pilot. So as I mentioned, we have 4 sites already. The exact number of sites we're going to expand to will depend on the amount of funding that we get via the SR process, which is concluding at the moment. So we should know quite soon how many sites we'll be able to fund. So you'll all, I assume, have seen kind of the guidance, the expression of interest guidance. So I assume that you kind of are familiar with roughly sort of what we're asking for. And obviously, I'm sure we'll get lots of questions on that today as well. But just one thing I wanted to touch on was that, so you've probably noticed that we talk a bit more about prolific offending in this pack, and that's something that hasn't really featured so far. So just a bit of background on that. The sentencing review, which was published earlier this year, gave us a recommendation to expand the ISC pilot with a specific focus on tackling prolific offending. So that's the reason why there is the focus on prolifics and why it's kind of new. But I just want to provide some reassurance that within that kind of very broad umbrella, we still welcome, applications for women sites, substance misuse sites, as we currently have, and also we really welcome new applications for sites that we kind of cohorts that we haven't seen before. So I suppose it's kind of down to you to look at your local area and think about, what are the needs here that are driving those offenders who kind of keep coming back in to the system. And we're really open to kind of anything that you think will work, anything that you think you've got the right setup for. So please don't kind of get too hung up on it needing to be like a prolifics court. But yeah, we're very open. So in terms of next steps, obviously, as you know, EOI process is launched. It's open until 17th of October. I just wanted to pop this up on the screen so that you had our ISC email address. You've also obviously I'm assuming that you can see my email address, which is just rosie.melville1@justice.gov.uk. So please feel free to reach out. The team and I are really happy to have chats. So you're not bothering us, feel free to just drop questions. We can hopefully answer them ourselves, or I can direct you to Hannah, who's going to speak in a minute, who has tons and tons of knowledge about how ISCs work on the ground. So yeah, please do get in touch. I will hand over to Hannah.
Thanks, Rosie. Morning, everyone. So as Rosie said, I'm Hannah. I have the strategic lead for the ISC pilots, and I've led on the implementation and the oversight of the existing 4 sites. I'm just going to talk you through today some of the key characteristics of what I think effective ISC delivery looks like, and what we will be looking for in terms of future ISC pilot sites, as well as touch upon some of the lessons that we've learnt along the way as well. More than happy to pick up as many questions as you have for us at the end. If you can just stick them in the Q&A or hold on to them until the end, I'd be grateful. I suppose just want to start by saying that I think the name Intensive Supervision Courts is not always entirely helpful. It kind of suggests that all of the work takes place in a courtroom, and the fact of the matter is, I would say probably around 10% of the work of the ISCs actually takes place within the court. It's a much broader approach of community partnership work that is the infrastructure of the ISCs. So I've got on this slide here just some key characteristics of what a good intensive supervision court should look like. And we'll start with targeting and looking at appropriate eligibility. So the ISCs, as Rosie has mentioned, we're looking to reach individuals who would otherwise receive short custodial sentences and who have complex needs. So substance misuse, mental health, they've been through, extensive trauma, those kinds of things would be our target cohort. The approach to how sites screen for eligibility, that needs to be fully considered in order to support implementation. And I suppose one of the advantages of having an ISC within a magistrate's court has been our ability to screen at the point of conviction. So that's done via a judicial decision as to whether the threshold for custody has been met. This is obviously not straightforward when it comes to screening at the Crown Court, so there does need to be a clear approach as to how you would screen eligible cases as part of your early thinking. The ISC offer is around individualised support plans based on thorough assessments, and across the sites we encourage collaborative assessments between probation as the lead agency and the treatment providers or women's services. So this being a trauma-informed approach whereby individuals are then not being asked the same questions multiple times over by different partners. And we're looking for sites with really top-notch multi-agency working arrangements and partnerships who are able to access and provide good provision of services, including mental health, treatment, substance misuse services, housing, employment support. The list is endless. Fundamentally, what we're looking for are these partnerships to adopt trauma-informed and relational approaches to working with the ISC cohorts that we're going to implement. In terms of what the ISC teams will look like, so they'll need to have a dedicated ISC probation practitioners and treatment providers or women's services, depending on your cohort, who, as Phil mentioned, through CJI, hopefully, will have the specialist training to support ISC delivery. The caseloads will be smaller than the business as usual equivalent, given the end-to-end management approach of being responsible for the pre-sentence work at the beginning, the court presence activity and the reviews during the order, and the full management of the sentence, as well as the intensity of which these cases are expected to be managed. And what we know that works and is another fundamental to the ISCs is the continuity of staff. So the same judge, the same probation officer, the same treatment provider or women's worker from start to finish, because this allows for the building of trust and engagement. An important mention at this stage is that the interim evaluation of the ISCs found that the ISCs are not only intensive for the participants, but also for the staff supervising the orders, and that they need to be appropriately supported with clinical supervision and clear expectations of what is required. Just in terms of the point on judicial leadership and partnership, so the judges play a crucial multifaceted role: authoritative, supportive, and motivational. They'll oversee regular review hearings where the same judge fosters accountability and encouragement of the ISC participant. In addition, the ISC judges are involved in decisions around incentives and sanctions. They're also very much part of our ISC partnerships. So I've touched on the importance of the partnership, but I cannot stress this enough. The success of the ISCs is dependent upon effective multi-agency collaboration at its core. The sites have weekly partnership meetings to ensure efficient information sharing and ensure enhanced support is being provided to participants. Co-location of partners, especially in women's ISCs, enhances accessibility and safety in trauma-informed environments. So if we can start thinking about co-locating probation and services together in your early thinking, that would be phenomenal. Another key characteristic of the ISC pilots is the ability to adjust the sentence plans based on individuals' changing needs and through the benefit of regular reviews. In addition, we model responsive breach processes that balance accountability with understanding and utilise incentives and sanctions, as Rosie's mentioned, tailored to individual circumstances. Unsurprisingly, clear and transparent communication is vital, ensuring that ISC participants know what they're signing up to before they consent. And this is achieved when you have the ISC team starting the work at the pre-sentence stage rather than waiting for the point of sentence to engage participants. The ISCs emphasise the importance of building recovery capital and being part of a community with pro-social opportunities. And what we've seen in the pilots to date is evidence of improvements in participants' mental well-being, reduction and abstention from substance misuse, restored family relationships and secured employment. These events are all celebrated, as is the completion of the ISC order, which is recognised with a graduation style court hearing. And you need to see those because they're incredibly empowering to watch and no doubt be part of. Just moving us on, thank you very much. Here I've just stuck in a slide of lessons learnt. So as Rosie mentioned, we've had the benefit of an ongoing evaluation working alongside us who have been able to highlight some areas for us to have a focus on. And these are the things that we want to focus on as they make a good ISC, and you might want to consider them as well as part of your own planning. So tailored trauma-informed support. I've talked a bit about this, but wraparound support tailored to individual needs, especially for women, is essential. Trauma-informed approaches and gender-responsive assessments. So within the Birmingham Women's Model, they use the Women's Risk Needs Assessment, also known as the WERNA for those who work in women's services. You'll probably be familiar with it. And that is used as a means of improving engagement and outcomes for women. So just to, again, have those kinds of things in your thinking. In terms of judicial continuity, respectfully, this will not be the right role for every judge. Having judicial leads that have an interest and appetite to sentence and review in trauma-informed ways is absolutely essential. Having the same judge throughout the order helps build relationships and motivate compliance. And you will hear participants on the ISC constantly talking about their judge. When I go and see my judge, or my judge has told me X, Y, and Z, there is an established relationship there. In terms of probation capacity, though, this won't be news to people, but I cannot stress this enough. Having dedicated probation resource for the ISC is of absolute paramount importance. You won't be able to deliver the expectations of the ISC or the court without it. High staff turnover will undermine the model and lead to increased workloads and disrupted relationships. And for those of you interested in an ISC, please discuss as early as possible with your local probation leads to understand their capacity and whether they are able to staff the model. So just on the point of enforcement versus rehabilitation, what we have seen at times are organisational priorities clashing and conflicting. As officers of the court, probation will have to enforce orders as required, and this can at times be at odds with an approach from a treatment provider, for instance, whose focus is essentially on rehabilitation. We've found that regular training and awareness of each other's roles and responsibilities is needed to ensure all staff are clear as to the expectations of the court and how we can support one another. That said, the ISCs provide an opportunity to work differently, and subject to risk, we ensure that rehabilitation opportunities are maximised rather than just jump into enforcement. Partnerships being powerful. I mean, I've repeatedly mentioned the importance of an effective ISC partnership, but please do not forget housing within this. It's a priority for everyone and extremely difficult to secure engagement from individuals when they don't have it. We'll be looking for housing representatives from your local authority to be part of the ISC partnership as a minimum, and that they're able to commit to dialing into the weekly partnership meeting for case discussions. In terms of mental health support, we have seen an upsurge in community sentence treatment requirements. So your mental health treatment requirements, your alcohol treatment requirements, and your drug rehabilitation requirements. Upsurge of all of those being imposed under the ISC order as a result of those collaborative pre-sentence assessments. So this collaborative assessment has essentially led to a significant increase in mental health treatment requirements in particular. This has led at times to long waiting lists, which is far from ideal. So clear pathways as to how we can access provision and minimal waiting times is desirable. In addition, we need the services involved in the ISC to be operating in trauma-informed approaches so that progress is not hindered. Just on the next point, our ability and willingness to adjust your processes in line with your local pilot needs are very helpful, as well as identifying the right staff for roles. The participants from existing sites have valued flexible they valued flexible relational approaches from staff, and we're keen to replicate these within the new ISC sites as well. And just on the last point, so I've already mentioned that we've seen evidence of very positive early outcomes in the existing ISC sites. But as with anyone working within the criminal justice service, you will no doubt know how important it is to manage your expectations as to what success looks like. The ISC tagline is progression, not perfection. And this is an expectation that I would encourage anyone when setting up their site. There is such importance in recognising that even partial progress, given the impact and encouragement that this will have upon the participants who've in fact never been applauded for their positive progress before, and especially not by a judge. So incredibly important to focus on the small wins as well. I think that's probably enough from me. Happy for questions for myself and Rosie.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks, Rosie. Very clear presentations. And just to kind of underline the point, so the expression of interest process for the next round of ISCs is the 17th of October through support to us from the Nabs Foundation for Women and Girls, the Orham Trust and the Hadley Trust. We can provide you with support in preparing high quality expressions of interests. So do get in touch with us. We'll put in the chat ways to get in touch with us to help you. I'm sure there are people on the call who we're already in touch with, but if you're not in touch with us, do let us know and we can help you prepare as good an EOI as we can help you do. So over to you now, really, to ask your questions. I think we don't have any questions in the chat, which is very in the Q&A, which is very rare for our seminars. Normally we're a chattier bunch, but if people have got questions, please raise your hand, and we'll take you off mute, and you can ask your question to either Rosie or Hannah. And if you could, when you do, if you could say who you are and which organisation you're from, that would be great too. The still silence.
You got something in the chat.
Who's there? Sorry. Yeah. And we've got Anna Beckett who's got her hand up. So Miranda, can you take her off mute so she can ask her question?
Hi, thanks. Camera on. I'm a Health and Justice Partnership Coordinator in Bedfordshire, and I'm meeting with the PDU head later this week to discuss the EOI. MHTRs, we struggle with waiting lists and provision for that. Would that block us from applying?
I can start us off, Rosie, and then go from there. So I suppose it's not ideal. Let's be honest. We want provision of service that is readily available. But I think what having these early conversations allow us to do is highlight those kind of areas for concern, but also to swiftly put some processes in place to support like an early assessment, and to look at timescales for when the MHTRs should be starting. So I know when we've struggled, particularly in Birmingham in the past, what has been helpful is just that ongoing dialogue with treatment providers, so that we know what the barriers are and that judiciary can be appraised of that. Because I think one of the things that is very apparent is the opportunity in reviews to discuss the progress of the order, and for the judge to know that there's an element of this order that hasn't started yet. So if it's an MHTR, their ability to say, you know, we know that this is pending. So, you know, you haven't actually had the benefit of being able to access every element of your order yet. So we're not expecting, you know, great miracles from you yet. We're expecting you to engage in the requirements of your order that you are able to access. But I think the benefit of having the MHTR team within the ISC partnership is that kind of ongoing dialogue. So you can constantly check whereabouts in the pecking order on the waiting list is Jane Bloggs, and being able to kind of provide that detail to the participant as to set their expectations of timescales, I think is really important, but judicially as well, because we want to maintain judicial confidence within the ISCs, and if they are imposing an MHTR as part of the order, then we need to really be giving them the assurances of, right, well, this will be starting within a certain timescale. So having that dialogue and that ongoing dialogue as part of your governance boards as well within the ISC, your local pilot sites, to know what the provision currently looks like, and to, I suppose, hold agencies accountable as well as to what is required, comes as part of that package. Rosie, do you want to say anything more about from a policy perspective?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is just that MHTRs are an issue nationwide. We are currently working at sort of, you know, at our level with NHSE, with Department for Health, to try to come up with a solution kind of, yeah, across the country. So just to provide some reassurance that you know, we don't have it's a tricky issue and we don't have a solution right now, but we're hoping to work towards something you know, to improve the situation for the future. So I would encourage you to, for all the reasons Hannah has said, but also in the hope that things might ease a little in the future, to not let that put you off.
That's really helpful. I'm doing already like monthly meetings with that team to sort of preempt the post-sentencing review uplift. But they've put in business cases for extra resource, and they're not getting anywhere in terms of clinical psychologist provision, and that's what we very much need in our court. So you're saying it wouldn't block us from putting in an EOI?
No, it won't block you. When we look at applications, there is obviously a lot to consider, and capacity of support services, availability of things like MHTRs is something we'll consider kind of in the round alongside everything. But like I say, on MHTRs, it's a real sort of nationwide problem, and something that we're trying to sort out at that level.
Thank you.
Just to say as well, Anna, we've had the new mental health treatment lead, the national lead, come out recently to Birmingham for the day to observe the ISCs. So she's very aware how the MHTR element is built into the ISCs and the massive demand for it, because I think of the 120 odd women that we've got in Birmingham on the ISC cohort at the moment, 70% of them have got an MHTR. So that, compared to the national average, which I think is around 5% of orders with a MHTR, really does shine a light on, how the ISCs drive up the volumes of CSTRs, community centred treatment requirements being imposed.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for that. Just some of the questions from the Q&A. So, what are the options for the EOI specific or wide? Asked Meredith. For example, could you propose a young adult ISC or offence specific ISC?
Yeah, so we broadly look for needs-based cohorts. On the youth versus adult point, so this EOI is for adults, but I know that the youth team are considering whether an ISC in that space would be appropriate. So I suppose young adult, sorry, it's slightly different, but if anyone is interested in youth, feel free to drop me a message and I can link you up with that team. So yeah, I think as long as you can evidence the needs that are driving that sort of offending, whether it's a specific offence or a specific kind of age category, as long as you can evidence, these are the needs that we are seeing kind of repeatedly driving this type of offending or this group of offenders, and therefore this is the kind of way we're going to set up our ISC, the support services that we're going to utilise to address those needs, and therefore kind of support that person kind of out of reoffending. That's the sort of thing we're looking for. So I suppose it can be kind of as specific or wide. I mean, if we look at the current cohorts, I suppose you can say substance misuse is quite specific, and women's is quite wide. So it's really just about how well can you identify the needs that are driving the offending and then address those needs. Hannah, did you want to add anything?
No, all good, thanks.
We've got a question from Victoria, which is, as a charity social enterprise who deliver trauma-informed, lived experience-led support services for women in the justice system, can you suggest the best way for us to be involved in the delivery of a pilot? At the moment, we are unclear the best way to approach this.
Yeah, so I think it would be, obviously, I'm not sure which area you're from, but it'd be about sort of joining up with local criminal justice partners in your area to sort of see if there's wider interest there. I suppose for you, it probably would be a women's ISC, to see if there's wider interest there in deliver a women's ISC. Obviously, as we've spoken about, it's a kind of very multi-agency based approach, so you'd have to sort of make sure that you had the support of the local criminal justice partners who'd be involved in delivering it. Hannah, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, just to say, Victoria, I think your starting point is the probation leads are very familiar with the EOI ask at the moment. So if you get in touch with your regional probation women's lead, as a starter, they will know about the EOI process, or certainly will be able to find out very quickly about the communications that have gone through the regional probation director channels. So I would advise that as your starting point. I suppose the key people that need to be fully kind of signed across the EOI process is probation, in terms of the lead agency. HMPPS, you can't do an ISC without the courts, and then other things kind of follow, but those are your starting points, is to be able to say, yes, we've got the court space, and yes, we've got the staff to run it.
Right, thank you for that. Another question in the Q&A. I imagine there's far more scope in current ISC arrangements for dual CSTR orders 2, MHTR alongside DRR or ATR. Is that a you question, Hannah?
Yeah, that is a me question, and that's a me question from like donkey's years ago when I was a court manager as well, because there has been for years a real ask about driving up the number of community sentence treatment requirements, and we have found that within the ISCs, that is what it delivers, because of the ability to do a collaborative assessment at PSR stage. We have got the mental health team saying, yes, we will be the named, clinician on the treatment requirement. We've then got the treatment provider from the drug and alcohol services saying, yes, they meet eligibility criteria for an ATR or a DRR. So our real ability to, at PSR stage, have the authorization from all of those leads to say, yeah, go ahead and make the recommendation, gives us the ability to drive up the numbers. So you're right, especially in all 4 of the pilot sites, we're seeing an increase in all 3 of the treatment requirements, but dual as well, because who knew that drugs and mental health were linked? It's no shocker, is it? But absolutely, this is about being able to target provision to meet the complex needs of these cohorts. I think we've nailed it in that respect.
Right, thank you for that. I think we have covered all the questions that I can see in the Q&A, or answered them, or I think Suzanne, my colleague, has answered them, or Rosie has. Has anyone else got a question that they want to pose directly? Please raise your hand. Or put something in the Q&A if you don't want to appear on camera. We've got Jack Tracy. Miranda, can you unmute Jack?
He's gonna direct a very complex question at me now, guarantee it. Can he be lifted off mute?
Yeah.
I think maybe he needs to unmute.
Yeah, I think
himself
you need to unmute yourself, Jack.
Apologies. Sorry, I was waiting
It's
for
all
that. It's going to be incredibly simple, actually. So it's just referring to one of the questions in the chat, which was how would a kind of local community organisation get involved? But if there's potentially a blockage to that, someone needs convincing, whether it's a combined authority mayor or a PCC or a local probation lead. What advice could you guys give to kind of community organisations, or indeed statutory organisations, that need to do a bit of a convincing job for others?
I have an answer to that, which is across the board to anybody. If you want to have an ISC and you're facing a blocker, we at MOJ are really, really interested in kind of you getting in touch with us and supporting you through this. There may be conversations we can have at our level, at sort of HQ or sort of more senior level, to help unblock those blockers, whatever they might be. So if anyone is having trouble there, please get in touch. There's also you know, as I was saying earlier with MHTRs, for example, I'm sure that lots of areas are seeing them as, you know, completely fairly seeing them as a bit of a blocker. But we can sort of have more of an in-depth conversation about, you know, the work that we're doing at our level and the impact the positive impact that might have. You know, that's not just specific to MHTRs, but just as an example. So yeah, from my sort of HQ policy perspective, I would say please do get in touch with us, but Hannah might have some more like practical on the ground tips.
Yeah, I suppose, hi Jack, by the way. I suppose it is, my initial question would be, where is the blocker? Because I think what we've got the benefit of now is across the 4 sites having additional levers to pull. So we have, you know, passionate judges who are very ready and willing to preach about the benefits of the ISC to their counterparts in other areas. You know, there's no getting away from the fact that backlogs within court is a concern, but you know, the ISC is not about creating additional problems for courts. It is about identifying processes which we have the opportunity to get things right first time, and that yes, we have court reviews, but they don't necessarily need to be held within the court room where the sentencing happens. We can be innovative and look elsewhere to use other spaces, because, you know, if court listing is a problem, we can look elsewhere. So I think it really depends where the blockage is, what the concerns are, and we will, as you know, Jack, we will have been through the issue at some point across any one of the 4 sites already. So we are in the benefit to be able to pull in and bring people with experience to talk through how those issues were addressed.
Right, thanks for that, Hannah. There's a string of questions around funding, which I think we've at various points given part answers to, but Laura Ward in a follow-up has said, is there any indication of the funding levels for areas mentioned, or somewhere this information can be discovered? Because local partnership providers have raised this in discussions.
So funding is decided based on forecasts. So we'll work with you to kind of forecast volumes for your area and then provide funding based on that. I don't think I'm not really sure what I'm allowed to say, but I don't feel like I'm allowed to say how much we currently give to areas. But yeah, we've kind of obviously bid for a sort of just like large pot of money in the SR based on what we predict it might cost, but it will be worked out per area and kind of tailored to that area.
Yeah, and I should also just say, just as a follow-up, you know, part of the partnership between the ministry and the centre is to provide areas with support, both in putting your expressions of interest together, but for those successful areas to then kind of work with you to build the partnerships and make sure the ISCs are kind of implementation ready, and then we have a certain amount of funding and permission with the MOJ to deliver training for free. So there's a sort of support package around as well. So it's obviously that's not the same as money, but it's also, I hope, helpful to areas that they're people, including Rosie and Hannah, who've been through the process before and can advise you and the partnerships you're in on how to get from A to B to C as smoothly as possible, which is not to say that the process will be completely smooth, but as smoothly as possible. I'm just checking to see if we have any other questions in the Q&A, which I cannot see anymore. And I see no people with hands up.
Bill, I just wonder if there's a follow-up just on what we were just talking about, if it might be helpful. Hannah, could you just mention the number of cases per probation officer? I think, is it 12 12 people per probation officer. I just wonder if that's like a bit of helpful detail to give a bit of an indication of how many probation officers at least we might be funding.
Get myself off mute. Yeah, so we did some work-based activity at the back end of last year. So this looks at the caseload for a full-time probation officer or a probation service officer. So for those who are not familiar, there are 2 grades within probation. So you've got a qualified probation officer who would typically hold the higher level risk cases, and a probation service officer who can hold lower to medium risk cases with less complexity attached. That being said, if you're in the ISC, you will have a fair bit of complex need. But for the substance misuse court, we predict a probation officer should hold around 12 cases, 13 within the women's cohort, and for a probation service officer, it was between 18 in the substance misuse court and 20 or so in the women's court. So yeah, that's just to give you a bit of a guide, really. So for anyone that knows about probation work, that is quite a significant reduction compared to business as usual generic case management.
Thank you.
Sorry, the reason for that, I should add, is because not just because of the intensity of the work and the reviews, etc., but the pre-sentence work as well. Because in the normal probation world, that all of that pre-sentence activity would be done by the probation team at court. So this goes back, the ISCs goes back to a time of what we call in the probation world end-to-end offender management. So the rationale behind that is that you have that continuity of relationship right from the start at pre-sentence throughout the order to the completion.
Thanks, Hannah. And then in addition to that, 1 court coordinator, and then the funding for the women's services for women's ISCs, which is it's to fund kind of key workers, essentially to fund the support they're giving to women, and to fund co-location of probation in the at probation and the women's services, so in the women's centre. So, and then the ISC fund, which is to fund the kind of enablers and incentives, and that's obviously based on kind of how many people you have are predicted to have in your ISC. So, although that's not numbers, hopefully that gives you a bit more of a sense of kind of scale of what is funded.
Right. So I see still no further questions in the Q&A, and I don't see anyone with a hand up. So without prolonging it, I suggest, unless anyone's got a last minute question they want to ask, that we give everyone 10 minutes of their lives back, unless Rosie or Hannah wanted to make any other further points that you haven't made. I don't think so. So just to say from me, thanks very much for attending. Thanks to my team for pulling it together. As I said at the top of the seminar, there are a number of practical resources on the Centre for Justice Innovation website. They're posted in the Q&A function, in particular the new implementation framework that we've just published this morning, so hot off the presses. Though we haven't actually printed it, but you know what I mean, which is designed to kind of help senior decision makers and people in partnerships develop and implement new ISCs, new problem-solving courts. So it gives you a kind of overview of what constitutes a problem-solving court, summary of the evidence base, and kind of some practical steps and checklists for putting it into practice. So please do look at that. If you've got any questions on those things, please come back to us. And as Rosie and Hannah said, that they are available for questions as people develop their expressions of interest. So thanks very much, everyone. Thanks particularly to Hannah and Rosie, really great presentations. Thanks for people who ask questions. Thanks for everyone attending, and yeah, I hope you all have good rest of your weeks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.